Greetings, friend. How long after you get stuck on a puzzle will you go before you give up? For me, I gave up on this puzzle by Shye after 1 hour of getting nowhere. Shye herself rated this puzzle 9 out of 10 for difficulty and just couldn't see how to do the break-in. However, Kishore from Unshackling Sudokus and Puzzles, who is one of the best solvers in all of India, did not give up and found a way to solve this. He did it with some hints from Shye, using an obscure strategy that's broken into 3 parts. I will retrace his solve and show you what the strategy is and the 3 specific points in the puzzle where you need to apply it. You're going to be surprised by that last one. I also sprinkle in some pause the video and what if moments. Click below if you want to give this puzzle a go. And with that, it's solving time. First thing Kishore does is puts down some Snyder notation. So he starts with these 7s here in block 3. Snyder notation, anytime in a 3x3 block, you have 2 possibilities for a candidate, you mark them. In case you solve one of the cells, you can solve the other one right away. He's trying to show some of the restrictions that are in this puzzle. He does some more Snyder marks with the 3s in block 3, the 6s in block 5, block 7, and block 3. And then he does some Snyder 9s in block 1 and block 6. Again, giving us some more clues about restrictions in this puzzle. Then he does mark some triples in some important cells in row 9. So 3, 4, 5 here, and then a 4, 5, 9 up in row 1. And what he says is there's no way for a human to find this first digit normally. And I'm going to address that later in the video, but not right this second. Then he starts marking some other cells with 3 or fewer candidates. He says these are important. So 1, 2, 4 here in row 1, a 1, 2 in row 1, column 9, and then in block 1 he does a 2, 8 in row 2, and the 1, 8 in row 3, column 2. Then he does a 1, 7, 8 down there in block 9, a 2, 7, 8 right above it, and 2, 3, 8 in row 7, column 9. Then he does some more Snyder marks. He's like, oh yeah, I need some Snyder's marks in the 4s and in the 7s. Then he marks this 1, 7 here in row 8, column 1, 2, 4, 7 in row 7, column 1, a 2, 6 row 2, column 9, and a 1, 3, 6 in row 3, column 9. These 4 cells that I just marked, very important for the second part of the strategy. So keep an eye on that. After doing those marks, he puts a 2, 4, 9 up here in row 2, column 3, and a 1, 4 in row 3, column 3, a 2, 8 in row 6, column 8. Then he marks a 2, 3, 9 in row 6, column 3, and I am so sorry I have this as an 8. It's really a 9. If this really bothers you, put it in the comments. And then you got a 2, 8, 9 in row 6, column 1. Now it's time for the first big trick. It has to do with these 1s and 2s here in this middle tower. It puts a lot of restriction on where the 1s and 2s can be in this puzzle. And so we're going to mark that in red. Where can the 1s and 2s be? And it's these cells. It's actually the same cells. And the key thing to keep in mind here is that, 1 and 2 has to be somewhere here in row 1 in the red. A 1 and a 2 has to be somewhere in the red in row 5. And then a 1 and 2 has to be somewhere in the red in row 9. And now what you want to look at is these 4 cells here. What you'll notice is that a 3 in column 2 is limited to either this cell or this cell. It's a conjugate pair. I use these quite a bit in advanced solving. And what it means is basically if one of these cells is not a 3, the other one has to be. And so that's how they're related. They are conjugate. And then if you look in column 8 and where the 4s can go, they're limited to these 2 cells. So 4 has to be in one of these 2 cells. This is important because it creates the restriction we need here to make some progress. And so what I'm going to do is highlight those cells in yellow. And so what you have to think about is how many 1s and 2s could you put in these 4 cells? Well, the answer, since you have to have at least 1 3 here and at least 1 4 there, you cannot stick more than A1 and A2 in the yellow cells. So you can have 1 1 there or 1 2. It also means you can only have, since you have 2 columns, you can only have at most 2 sets of the digits 1 and 2 in column 1 and column 9 in those red cells. That's the most you could have. We know we have 3 sets. So what we're saying is that 2 of the sets of digits 1 and 2 have to be in column 1 and 9 in those red cells, and then only 1 set of the digits 1 and 2 can be in the yellow cells. And if you don't understand that, try sticking more, less or more 1s and 2s in here and see what happens. If you do 2 sets in the yellow, obviously no place for the 3 and the 4. If you try to do 2 of the same digit, you're going to mess up where you can put the remaining digits in the reds and the yellows. So take my word for it. What we end up having is, if we remove those reds, is that you have exactly 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4 in these 4 cells. We know, a 3's got to be in one of these 2 cells, 4's got to be in one of these 2 cells, and then a 1 and 2 have to be somewhere in these 4 cells. This strategy, Kishore didn't know what it was called, but I can tell you, this is called multi-sector hidden sets. Basically, think of a naked quadruple that's not in the same house. So it's not in the same row or column. It's split up between, in this case, 2 different houses. But there's a restriction so that these 4 cells share the 4 main candidates in common. And the reason I know about this is because of a great puzzle pack that Jovial did for me using multi-sector hidden sets. Only members of my Smarty Party got access to that great pack. So if you want to get amazing puzzle packs for the best setters in the world, click on the pinned comment below to join the Smarty Party, and I can send you monthly puzzle packs and other exclusive content. But after we did this first big trick, what it does is it blocks out this 7 that was in the Snyder mark there. So now we can solve our first cell for a 7, and this is quite helpful. But like I said, there's 2 more tricks, 2 more things we have to do using these MSHS in order to make any more progress in the puzzle. But first, we can do a little bit of marking here. Because you put the 7 here, now the 8s are limited in block 1 in column 2 to those 2 cells. And then it forces the 8s in block 4 right there. And then Kishore marked this 1, 4, 5 in row 3, column 1. And it's now time for our second big trick. Okay? What Kishore talked about is there's these 4 cells that I mentioned before. We need to figure out what can go in these cells. And using multi-sector hidden sets, we will find some restrictions, logical restrictions, very quickly. And so let's start down here. If this cell was a 1, what would that do to this puzzle? And the thing you're trying to figure out is, if you ever force more than 1 1 into these 4 yellow cells, we know that's impossible because we already proved it can only be 1 1 in those 4 cells. So if you put a 1 right here, I've marked green where the 1s are going to end up. You will end up with this one and this one. You put a 1 right here, and then this one will create a pointed pair of 1s right here to go with this one to solve for a 1 here, since it's this green. And then you put a 1 there. Then what it does is it puts a 1 here, and with this one, you'd end up putting a 1 right there. If you notice, these 2 cells are green, which means those would be forced to be 1s if the cell was a 1. We can't have that. So we know this cell cannot be a 1 because it would break the puzzle. You put 2 1s there, and then we wouldn't have enough room for the 2, 3, and a 4. So we can eliminate the 1 from there and solve that for a 7. Huge. Now we're going to move on and use some coloring to look at this cell. Could this cell be a 2? And the thing that's working on is that the 2s, that red thing I showed you, the 2s can be here or there, and then the restriction plays up here with these 4 MSHS cells really is what creates the restriction we're looking for. So you put a 2 there. With this 2, you got a 2 right here, and then you create a pointing pair of 2s up here because of this green. And with this 2, forces a 2 right here, and then with this 2 and this 2 and this green, you put a 2 here, and with these 2s, you put a 2 right there. Again, we have 2 green cells. Can't happen. We can't have 2 2s in the yellow. So we know this cell cannot be a 2. It has to be a 4. Awesome. Now we come up here, same thing. Can this be a 2? And you'll see kind of in reverse. And this is what I love about Shye. way she telegraphs and then also rewards you. Once you figure out one pattern, she's going to give you another one and then another one to kind of reinforce that concept. And so if you put a 2 right there, forces a 2 in this spot, and then you end up with a pointing pair of 2s right here to go with this 2, make this cell a 2, and with these 2 and this 2, you put a 2 right here, and with this 2, you put a 2 there. Again, we have 2 yellows. Well, actually, we have 2 of the yellow cans would end up being a 2 because you see 2 greens there. That can't happen, so this cannot be a 2. It has to be a 6. And Kishore cleaned up a little bit by putting a pointing Snyder mark of 6s right there. And so we go to that last cell. Can this be a 1? If that's a 1, again, 1, 1 puts a 1 right here. And then this one creates a pointing pair of 1s right here with this one. You end up having a 1 right there. And with these 2 green and this one, you'd have a 1 there. And with this one, you'd end up with that 1 right there. Again, 2 greens are 1. We know a 1 cannot be there. Has to be a 3. All these other things break the puzzle. This is the intended logic that Shye showed for the second trick, the second part of the strategy. We still got 1 more. But what we can do in the meantime is get a little bit more solving in. We can solve that for 3. If you want to learn a little bit more about how coloring works, check out this tutorial. And while you're at it, subscribe to Smart Hobbies if you want to solve Sudoku using coloring. Okay, Kishore made a couple more marks, a 1, 4, 7 right there, a 1, 2, 5 in row 9, column 9, and in the third big trick setup, before we do that, we got to notice that we put that 3 there, and so that eliminates the 3 from this cell right here. And what's key to note in what Shye talks about is, well, what Kishore talked about is that where can the 2s be now in columns 3 and 7? They can be in the blue. And so what happens is if you could eliminate outside of the columns, you can eliminate 2 of these possibilities. You would force in columns 3 and 7 the 2s to be in the same row, row 2. Then again, that would break the puzzle. So how could you eliminate these 2s down there? And the answer lies over here. First of all, because of these 7s, we could mark a 7 there and eliminate 7 from right there. And so there's 2 ways to do that, right? If you want to make both of those 2, well, you just need to eliminate the 8. How can we do that? Well, we put a cell, an 8 in a cell that sees both of them. So if you put an 8 right here in this purple, or an 8 right here in these purples, it would see both of these cells. It would eliminate the 8 and cause both 2s. If both of those were 2s, you eliminate the 2s in these 4 blue, and then you'd force a 2 in these 2 spots in column 3 and 7, and you break the puzzle. So we know an 8 cannot be in the purple. This is the third big trick. Really, really awesome. I love this. Yes, very hard to figure it out. I want to show this to you to kind of see where you can go with Sudoku. The more you look at things like this, the more chance you have to actually solve a puzzle in this way. And I understand all these strategies. Just fascinating the way this solve went. And I think Kishore was fascinated by it as well. That's why he continued to press on with this puzzle. And so what we end up doing is now we can solve that cell for a 1. And by putting a 1 right here, there's only one place for an 8 in column 8. And so we can solve that for an 8, which makes us a 2, 4. So now 2 of those digits, a 2 and a 4, are restricted here in column 8, which means we can actually remove the 2 from over here and know that the 1 and 3 have to be over in these 2 yellow cells. And now it's time for my what if moment. Earlier, Kishore said that there's no way a human could possibly get the first digit in this cell. And so I'm going to show you the what if moment. What if you try to solve this using conventional strategies? How could you do it? And I'll show you that right now. Okay, if you are starting this puzzle from scratch and you're trying to figure out how to do some solving, it is intense. First thing you do is you go up here and I'll fill out all these squares just to make any kind of headway after some basic pointing pairs. You'd have to do a discontinuous loop using these cells up here. And I'll show you how it works. So basically you have these 9s that are a strong link. So by strong, that means it's like a conjugate pair. If one of this is false, the other one has to be true. There's only 2 of them in the block. And so what you end up doing is this has a strong link to this cell. So the 9 has a weak link to the 4 because it's within the cell. So if the 9 is true, 4 would be false. Has another weak link to this 4. If that's true, this would be false. And it has a strong link to the 1. Anytime you have a bi-value cell, they have a strong link with each other. That's a conjugate pair within the cell. If one's false, the other has to be true. And then you have a weak link to this one. Strong links can act as weak links. Strong link to this 9. Weak link back to this 9. And then strong here. So this is your discontinuous loop. You end up with 2 weak links right here. Basically what it means is this cell could never be a 4. And so we can prove that pretty quickly. If this cell is a 9, this would be a 1, this would be a 4, this cell can't be a 4. Okay. If this cell's not a 9, we know this cell has to be a 9. And so this cell can't be a 4. That's the first advanced strategy you could use. It gets worse after that. There's multiple other discontinuous loops. There are Sudoku. There's an alternate or almost lock set XZ. Okay, and I've shown you how to do almost lock sets. I'll put a link to that tutorial here. There's almost lock set XY wing, which is like an XY wing on steroids. You have to do all of that stuff, and eventually you get to the point where you can solve this cell for a 5. Once you solve this cell for a 5, you're actually able to pretty quickly solve this cell for a 7, and you're still not done. There's still another continuous loop you need to be able to crack this puzzle. So when Kishore says it's not really possible, it's highly unlikely that a human is going to go through all that effort for this puzzle. So let's go back to the main solve. Okay, we're back, and you can look right here is that since you have a 1 and 3 in the column, that bumps the 1 out of there. We can solve for 8. Solve for a 2 right there, row 2, column 2, and remove the 2 from the blue 4, 9. We can actually remove all the blue cells. And then what we can do is, since we put the 8 right here, and you got the 8 here, the only place for an 8 in block 9 is now right there in row 7, column 9. And then Kishore, he marked this 3, 5 in row 8, column 7. Then he did some Snyder marks of the 8s in block 2. Important to note that they're in column 5 and 6. And then the 8s in block 8 in columns 4 and 5. And then he's like, oh yeah, we can actually solve this 8 right here because of the 8 right there and remove these marks. And again, I apologize, that should be a 2, 3, 9. I'm sorry. All right, so he puts the 8 there, which forces now the 8s to be in these 2 spots. Okay, and since you have the 8s restricted to columns 5 and 6 here in blocks 2 and blocks 5, the only place an 8 can be in block 8 is here in column 4, which is this cell right there. So we can solve that for an 8 and remove the 8 from right there. And then Kishore put a 1, 5, 9 up here in that block, and then he put a 2, 5 right here. And so this is interesting. This is the key to solving the rest of this puzzle. You need to figure out if this is a 2 or a 5. Kishore kind of goes to a long way about to figure out what this cell is, but there's actually an easy way to figure this out, and I'm going to tell you that in our pause the video moment. So pause the video and see if you can solve this cell by using a pointing pair while I give you a few seconds. Okay, congratulations if you spot it. You are excellent at Sudoku solving. And those of you who just want to enjoy the show, if you look over here in this block, the only place 2 can be is in these 2 cells in block 4. Because of that 2, it can't be here. And so this is a pointing pair. It means that this cell cannot contain a 2, and you can solve it for a 5. Kishore missed that, but he did, his roundabout way did solve this cell for a 5. And I'm going to show you the rest of his solve right now. Because of this 5, that means that this is a 3, that's a 2, and that's a 5. And then you're able to put a 3, 4 right here. And because of the 3, 4 right here, in this 3, you can solve for a 3 here, which just places that Snyder 6, and of course now allows us to solve for a 1 right there and a 3. So we got 2 of the digits in the yellow. This has to be now a 2. That's a 9. This is how he solved it. And then he put a 1, 5 up here. Excuse me. Got rid of that 9. And with this 1, 5 naked pair, now this has to be a 4, and that's got to be your 9. Okay, after that, you came down here and notice, the only place left for a 1 and block 4 is right there, which means this now has to be your 2. After doing the 2, you came down here and saw, okay, I got my 3 here, so that's a 4 and that's a 3. You look right here, this could be a 3 or a 6, but I got my 3 there, so that's your 6 and that's your 3. After doing the 6 and the 3, then he came over here, and what you see is you need a 1, 2, 9 in column 9. I got a 1, 2 right there, so that means this has to be your 9 now. And if you look right there, I have a 1, 4, 7, you got a 1, 7 here. This now has to be a 4, which gives us a 2 there, a 1 here, a 2 here, and a 4. So we got all 4 yellow squares. You see the 1, 2, 3, and the 4 now. Awesome. And now with this 4, you look down here and you see that we got a full house 5. So this 4 and 5 means this has to be a 9 is what Kishore solved and puts a 5 right there. Allows us to get the 1 and the 5 right there. Awesome. And then came over here, and because of this 1, the only place left for 1 and block 3 is right there, which means this has to be a 7. Then he's able to solve this cell for a 6 because you needed, it's like 6 or 7. I got my 7 right there. So there's your 6. And he came down and then solved this cell for a 6, solved this cell for a 9. I got the full house knowing this has to be a 4. Then he looked here and went 5, 8. I got my 5 here. That's your 5. That's your 8, which is now means this is a 7, 9. I got a 9 here. That's a 9, and that's a 7, which puts the 7 right there. And then the last 2 digits, because of this 8, he's able to solve for the 8 right there, and the last cell being a 4. Watch this next video to see a really cool strategy that Shye created. Also want to thank Unshackling Sudoku and Puzzles. You guys are great. Please check out their channel in the description below. Also, please consider supporting me through my Buy Me a Coffee page. I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for watching.